The alert came at 0400 hours, dragging Commander Elena Cross from a restless sleep aboard the ESS Horizon. No standard diplomatic message arrived with gentle chimes and formatted protocols. This one screamed Priority Alpha across every console in her quarters, bathing the room in crimson light. She was on her feet before conscious thought caught up, muscle memory from 2 decades of military service taking control. The message origin made her freeze. Vel'Kara Prime. The homeworld of the galaxy's oldest empire, ruled by queens who had never spoken directly to any human government. The matriarchal Vel'Kara had maintained their dominion for over 4,000 years, and their sacred veil tradition made their monarchs untouchable, unknowable, until now. Elena read the message 3 times, searching for some indication of fraud or mistake. An invitation, not to the diplomatic corps, not to Earth's president, but to her specifically. Commander Elena Cross was invited to an audience with Queen Ashira herself to witness the Grand Convocation and discuss matters of mutual concern. The phrase mutual concern between a species that controlled half the known galaxy and humanity's 37 colony worlds felt absurd. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, was already waiting in the briefing room when she arrived. His dark eyes were sharp despite the hour, and a tactical display of Vel'Kara space rotated slowly behind him. "Tell me you see it too," he said. "Tell me I'm not hallucinating from bad coffee. You see it." Elena moved to the display, expanding the view of Vel'Kara Prime. The planet was a fortress, ringed by defense platforms that could atomize a battle fleet in seconds. Question is why? Why now? Why us? Why me? Marcus pulled up historical records, scrolling through centuries of Vel'Kara contact. In 4,000 years, they've granted exactly 0 private audiences to foreign leaders. Their queens appear only during the Grand Convocations, always behind the sacred veil. No photographs, no recordings, nothing. Some people think the queens aren't even real anymore, just holograms or figureheads. Then, why break protocol? Elena stared at the planet, its surface obscured by atmospheric processors and privacy shields. What changed? Maybe they're scared of something. Maybe they want something. Or maybe... Marcus hesitated. Maybe they need help and humans have a reputation. Elena knew what reputation he meant. Humanity had entered galactic politics only 70 years ago, but they'd already earned a name. The species that didn't bow. The ones who looked at 1,000-year-old empires and asked uncomfortable questions. The people who had fought 3 wars for independence and won every one, despite overwhelming odds. Other species called it recklessness. Humans called it refusing to kneel. "Prep the shuttle," Elena said. "Skeleton crew. If this is a trap, I don't want to lose the whole ship. And if it's not a trap, if it's real?" Elena met his eyes. "Then we're about to learn something the galaxy has been hiding for 4 millennia. Either way, we go." The journey to Vel'Kara Prime took 6 days through authorized jump corridors, each one monitored by massive defense stations. Elena used the time to study everything humanity knew about the Vel'Kara, which wasn't much. They were elegant, standing 7 feet tall with silver skin that shimmered in light. Their culture valued tradition above all else, and the sacred veil was the cornerstone of their society. Queens ruled from behind it, their wisdom considered divine, their judgment absolute. But the more Elena read, the more questions emerged. Why did the queens never show their faces? Why did they speak only through intermediaries during the Grand Convocations? Why did their reign always last exactly 30 years, no more, no less, before a new queen took the veil? The record showed no exceptions, no variations. It felt less like tradition and more like procedure. The shuttle descended through Vel'Kara Prime's atmosphere, and Elena got her first view of the capital city. It sprawled across an entire continent, towers of crystalline architecture reaching toward purple skies. At the city's heart stood the Celestial Palace, a massive structure that seemed to grow from the planet itself, all flowing curves and impossible angles. They landed in a private courtyard, where a delegation waited. The Vel'Kara officials were imposing in their formal robes, faces impassive, as they guided Elena and Marcus through corridors that hummed with ancient power. No small talk, no pleasantries, just silence and the echo of footsteps on polished floors. Then they reached the chamber, and Elena understood why she'd been summoned alone. The room was small, intimate, nothing like the grand halls she'd expected. And, standing in the center, surrounded by the shimmering distortion of the sacred veil, was Queen Ashira. The veil obscured her features, bending light and sound into incomprehensible patterns. But when she spoke, her voice was clear and desperate. "Commander Cross, thank you for coming. I have very little time, and what I'm about to tell you will put both our lives in danger." Elena's hand instinctively moved toward her sidearm. Marcus shifted his stance, ready for anything. "Your Majesty, I don't understand. The invitation said, the invitation was a lie approved by my council because they believe you pose no threat." Ashira moved closer to the veil's edge, and Elena could almost make out her silhouette. "They're wrong. You're human. Your people don't accept things just because they've always been that way. That's why you're the only one I can trust with the truth." "What truth?" "The sacred veil isn't protection, Commander. It's a prison." The words hung in the air like a detonation. Elena felt Marcus tense beside her, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Explain." "For 4,000 years my people have believed the veil grants divine wisdom to our queens. They're taught it's a sacred barrier that allows us to commune with higher powers, to make decisions unclouded by mortal concerns. But that's a lie. The veil is a neural suppression field. It keeps us compliant, controlled, while the High Council rules in our name." Elena's mind raced through the implications. An entire civilization built on a fabrication. Generations of queens imprisoned in plain sight, used as living symbols while others held true power. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because in 3 days the Grand Convocation begins. Billions across the galaxy will watch as I give the traditional address, speaking the words the Council puts in my mouth. But this time, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to remove the veil in front of everyone and show them what it's hidden. And when I do, the Council will try to kill me before I can speak." Ashira's voice shook with suppressed emotion. "I need someone who won't stand aside when that happens. Someone with humanity's particular talent for rebellion." Marcus stepped forward. "Your Majesty, what you're describing is a coup. If we help you, we're committing an act of war against the Vel'Kara Empire. I'm not asking you to fight my people, Lieutenant. I'm asking you to help me free them from a lie they don't even know they're living. And yes, it might start a war. But isn't that what humans do? Fight wars that need fighting regardless of the cost?" Elena studied the distorted figure behind the veil. Every protocol, every diplomatic regulation screamed at her to refuse, to report this to Earth Command and let them decide. But she'd seen enough injustice in her career to know what happened when good people followed orders instead of conscience. She thought about the colonies Earth had fought to keep free, the blood spent to ensure humanity chose its own path. "What do you need from us?" Elena asked. Over the next 2 days, Elena and Ashira planned in stolen moments between official ceremonies. The Queen explained the palace layout, the security protocols, the location of the main broadcast center that would transmit the Grand Convocation across the galaxy. The veil's technology was ancient, but sophisticated, connected to implants surgically embedded in Ashira's skull. Removing it outside controlled conditions would be agonizing and potentially fatal. But during the convocation there would be a brief window when the field calibrated for the broadcast. Elena brought in her small team, each one volunteers who understood they might not leave Vel'Kara Prime alive. Marcus would handle the technical aspect, ensuring the broadcast stayed live no matter what the Council tried. Lieutenant Sarah Kim would secure their extraction route, and Elena would stand beside Ashira when the moment came. A human presence to show the galaxy this wasn't just internal Vel'Kara politics. The morning of the Grand Convocation arrived with deceptive calm. The palace, filled with dignitaries from 100 worlds, all gathered to hear the Queen's traditional address about unity, prosperity, and the eternal wisdom of the veil. Elena wore her formal uniform, every medal earned through blood and determination. She caught Marcus's eye across the grand hall and saw the same determination she felt. Ashira emerged from the royal chambers, the sacred veil shimmering around her like a personal aurora. The crowd fell silent as she took her position on the central dais, broadcast drones hovering in perfect formation around her. Billions were watching now, across every corner of Vel'Kara space and beyond. The High Council stood in their places of honor, faces serene and confident. They'd controlled this empire for millennia, so certain in their power that they couldn't imagine it ending. Elena recognized that arrogance. She'd seen it in every tyrant humanity had ever faced. Ashira began with the traditional words, her voice carried through speakers that made it seem to come from everywhere at once. But Elena noticed her hands trembling slightly, the micro-adjustments in her posture. She was preparing herself for what came next. Then Ashira deviated from the script. "My people, I stand before you today not to speak of our eternal traditions, but to shatter them. What you're about to witness will challenge everything you believe about the sacred veil and the queens who have worn it." The council members exchanged glances, confusion turning to alarm. The head counselor, an ancient Vel'Kara named Verath, made a subtle gesture. Royal guards began moving through the crowd toward the dais. "The sacred veil is not divine," Ashira continued, her voice growing stronger. "It is not protection, it is imprisonment. For 4,000 years, your queens have been prisoners, controlled through neural implants and suppression fields while the High Council rules in our name." Chaos erupted in the hall. Verath shouted commands, and the guards rushed forward. But Marcus had already activated the override codes Ashira provided. The broadcast drones locked in place, unable to be redirected or shut down. Every attempt to cut the transmission failed as human-designed encryption kept the signal alive. Ashira reached up to the veil, her fingers finding the hidden controls. Elena moved to her side, sidearm drawn and aimed at the approaching guards. "Not another step," Elena commanded, her voice cutting through the confusion. The guards hesitated, trained never to harm outsiders during a convocation, uncertain how to handle a human threatening violence in their most sacred ceremony. That hesitation was all Ashira needed. She deactivated the veil. The shimmering field collapsed, and for the first time in 30 years, Queen Ashira's face was visible to her people. But it wasn't the serene, wise expression they expected. Her silver skin was marked with scars where implants had been installed and maintained. Neural interface ports ran along her temples, some still bleeding from the veil's disconnection. Her eyes, freed from the field's influence, blazed with rage and pain and desperate hope. "Look at me," she said, her voice raw. "Look at what they did to ensure I would speak only their words, think only their thoughts. I am the 17th queen to serve under this system, and everyone before me died with these same scars, hidden behind the veil. This is your sacred tradition. This is the truth they didn't want you to see." The broadcast carried her words to every world in Vel'Kara space. How it could see the reactions rippling through the hall as the full horror registered. These people had been taught to revere their queens, to see them as touched by the divine. Now they saw the brutal machinery of control that had been hidden for millennia. Verath recovered first, his voice booming with authority. "Seize them! The human has compromised the queen's mind. This is an act of war." But the guards weren't moving. They stood frozen, staring at their queen's scarred face, at the evidence of systematic torture disguised as ceremony. One of them, a veteran who had served for decades, dropped her weapon. "What have we done?" she whispered. "You've served a lie," Ashira said, addressing the guard directly. "But you don't have to anymore. None of you do. The truth is out now. The galaxy knows. And you have to decide who you serve, the council that lied to you, or the queens they enslaved." The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Elena could feel the weight of civilizations watching, waiting to see if this would end in freedom or bloodshed. Marcus kept the broadcast alive, his fingers flying across his portable console as he fought off increasingly sophisticated attempts to shut them down. Then Sarah's voice crackled in Elena's earpiece. "Commander, we've got a problem. Council guard units are mobilizing. Heavy weapons. They're going to storm this hall and kill everyone inside rather than let this broadcast continue." Elena made her decision in a heartbeat. "Ashira, we need to move. now. But the queen shook her head. No, if I run they'll spin this as a coup, as human manipulation. I have to see this through. She turned back to the cameras, blood from her neural ports trickling down her face. People of Vel'Kara, I know this is painful. I know it challenges everything you believed. But ask yourselves, have you ever truly seen your queens? Have you ever heard us speak words that weren't carefully scripted? Have you ever wondered why we reign for exactly 30 years before a new queen takes the veil? The hall's main doors exploded inward. Council Guard units poured through, armored and carrying weapons designed to kill even in sacred spaces. Their commander's voice boomed through speakers. By order of the High Council, Queen Ashira is deemed compromised and marked for immediate termination. All personnel evacuate the hall. The royal guards, the ones who had served the palace their entire lives, turned to face the council's forces. The veteran who had dropped her weapon picked it back up, but this time she aimed it at the incoming soldiers. No, she said simply, not anymore. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations. The royal guards, outnumbered and outgunned, chose their queen over their commanders. They formed a protective line around the dais, and when the council forces opened fire, they fired back. The sacred Convocation Hall became a battlefield, and humanity's reputation for impossible defiance spread to an entire species in a single moment. Elena fought alongside them, her training and experience making her a force multiplier in the chaos. Marcus kept the broadcast alive even as weapons fire shattered equipment around him. Sarah fought her way to their position with a commandeered transport, and Ashira stood at the center of it all, her scarred face broadcast to billions, refusing to hide or flee. This is what happens when truth challenges power, Ashira said into the cameras, her voice steady despite the violence around her. They would rather kill me than let you know what they've done. But I'm not the first queen to want freedom. I'm just the first one who found allies willing to fight for it. The tide turned when off-world military units watching the broadcast from their ships began demanding explanations from their commanders. Protests erupted on Vel'Kara colonies as citizens realized the enormity of the deception. And critically, more royal guards across the planet abandoned their posts and converged on the capital, choosing loyalty to their true sovereign over the council that had manipulated them. The council guard forces in the hall found themselves surrounded, their communications jammed by Marcus's increasingly effective countermeasures, their reinforcements mysteriously delayed by Sarah's demolition of key transit routes. Vareth himself tried to flee through secret passages, only to be intercepted by palace servants who had spent lifetimes watching queens suffer in silence. When the fighting finally stopped, the convocation hall was in ruins, but Ashira still stood. Elena moved to her side, offering support as the queen's strength finally began to fail. The neural implant removal had been traumatic, and she'd lost blood, but her eyes remained fierce. "Is it still broadcasting?" Ashira asked. Marcus checked his console, a grin breaking through his exhaustion. Every world, every station, every device in Vel'Kara space. They can't shut it down now. It's everywhere. Ashira turned to the cameras one final time. My people, what happens next is your choice. You can try to rebuild the old system, pretend this truth was never revealed. Or you can build something new, something honest. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know humanity has shown us that fighting for freedom, even against impossible odds, is always worth it. She collapsed then, and Elena caught her, carefully avoiding the damaged implants. Medical teams were already rushing in, both Vel'Kara and human doctors working together to stabilize the queen. As they worked, Elena looked around at the devastation, the cost of a single truth told at the right moment. The aftermath took months to resolve. The High Council faced trial for crimes spanning millennia. Their carefully constructed system of control dismantled peace. Other queens, those who had served before and survived their 30 years scarred and traumatized, came forward to testify. The galaxy watched as one of its oldest empires confronted the lie at its foundation. Ashira survived, though she would carry the scars forever. She insisted on keeping them visible, a reminder of what hiding truth had cost. When she addressed her people again, it was without ceremony or artificial barriers, just a leader speaking honestly to those she served. Elena stood beside her during that address, at Ashira's request. "The humans have a saying," the queen told her people. "The truth will set you free. But first it will make you uncomfortable. We're going to be uncomfortable for a long time. But we'll be free, and that's worth any price." The Vel'Kara Empire transformed over the following years, its rigid hierarchy giving way to something more flexible, more honest. Ashira remained queen not because tradition demanded it, but because her people chose her, again and again. And when she finally stepped down, it was on her own terms, to a successor she helped select rather than one imposed by council decree. Elena returned to the ESS Horizon, her mission complete in ways she'd never anticipated. Earth Command debated censuring her for the risks she'd taken, but public opinion made that impossible. Humanity had proven once again that they would stand against injustice regardless of the cost, and the galaxy took note. On the day Elena prepared to leave Vel'Kara Prime for the final time, Ashira came to see her off privately. The queen's scars had healed as much as they would, silver skin knitting around the implant sites but never quite erasing them. "Thank you," Ashira said simply, "for seeing a prisoner where everyone else saw a symbol, for choosing to act when staying neutral would have been safer." Elena smiled. "That's just what humans do, Your Majesty. We see chains, and we can't help but try to break them, even when they've been disguised as crowns for 4,000 years. "Especially then," Ashira agreed. She handed Elena a small crystal, traditional Vel'Kara craftsmanship that would have taken years to create. "This is for your people, so they remember that truth, no matter how painful, is always stronger than the most beautiful lie." Elena accepted the gift, feeling its weight. "We won't forget, and neither will the galaxy." As the shuttle lifted off, Elena looked back at Vel'Kara Prime one last time. The planet looked different now, its rigid traditions cracking open to let something new emerge. It would be messy, uncertain, sometimes painful, but it would be honest, and that made all the difference. Marcus sat beside her, reviewing the mission logs. "You know Earth Command is going to have a field day with this. We just helped overthrow one of the galaxy's major powers. We helped free them," Elena corrected. "There's a difference. You think other empires will see it that way?" Elena smiled, thinking of the crystal in her pocket and the scarred queen who had chosen truth over comfort. "I think they'll see what happens when you build a civilization on lies, and I think some of them are going to start asking uncomfortable questions about their own sacred traditions. Humanity's already got a reputation for causing trouble. Might as well earn it." The Horizon jumped to hyperspace, carrying them back toward Earth, but the ripples of what had happened would spread far beyond one empire or one species. The galaxy had watched a human stand beside a captive queen and choose rebellion over diplomacy, freedom over stability. They'd seen proof that even the oldest lies could be shattered by simple, unflinching truth. And across 100 worlds, in 1,000 cultures, people began asking questions they'd been taught never to voice. The sacred veil had fallen, and humanity had shown them all that sometimes the most sacred duty was refusing to accept things as they'd always been. That was the real power of humanity in the galaxy. Not their weapons, not their ships, but their absolute refusal to bow before any tradition that demanded freedom as its price. They looked at empires that had stood for millennia and asked one simple, devastating question: why? And when the answer was, because it's always been this way, humans simply smiled and began dismantling whatever needed to change. The galaxy would never be quite the same. And for those who had suffered in silence behind sacred veils of their own, that was exactly the revolution they'd been waiting for. Elena Cross returned to Earth a hero, though she never quite saw herself that way. She'd just done what any decent person would do when faced with injustice. She'd refused to look away. The fact that this simple act had toppled an empire and freed generations of enslaved queens said more about the galaxy's tolerance for comfortable lies than it did about human courage. But in the years that followed, as more species questioned their own traditions and more hidden truths came to light, humanity's role became clear. They were the ones who asked the uncomfortable questions. The ones who saw cages even when they were gilded and called sacred. The ones who believed that freedom mattered more than stability, truth more than tradition. Humanity, the species that looked at 4,000 years of history and said, "That's nice, now let's talk about what's right." And the galaxy, slowly, painfully, beautifully, began to listen.